Hey guys, welcome back to the Garage Build series. Today what we're going to be talking about is how we poured our monolithic slab. Alright guys, so today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about how the day went with our concrete slab pour. We ran into some huge hurdles doing this. I didn't get any really good video. I did get some pictures, so I'm going to kind of walk you through. Today isn't a typical video like I do on tell you how to do things or little tips and tricks, because I'm not a concrete guy. We went out and did this on our own. There are plenty of other people that can do way better on telling you how to do this. And one of those is Day Concrete. His channel is exceptional. Before I even went out on my own to try and do this, I watched a ton of his videos. They are exceptional at giving you tips and tricks on what to do, so I would definitely recommend him. He's the one that I've taken a lot of techniques from and used them myself. So today isn't going to be one of those days where I tell you how to do things. I'm just going to share with you how the day went. And it started off at, I believe it was 2 in the morning. They didn't call for weather at all that week, but my wife wakes me up in the middle of the night and she says, "Hey, I think it's raining outside." And we open the window and it's just downpouring. So we run outside at 2 in the morning and we're tarping the dirt road that leads up to the garage to keep it from getting super soupy. It lets up in like 15 minutes. Unfortunately, that downpour really put a kink into our plans. So we'll go ahead and jump over to the computer screen here and I'll show you guys what happened. So here in this picture you can see that we have a cement truck up here. This road comes up to our one-car garage and then does a switchback up to our garage that we're building, which is up here. Unfortunately, it was super muddy. You can see right here, this is where we came down with our septic and we tied in right here in the roadway. And once he was sliding around as he was coming up here, but once he got to that stuff, it was too soft. He just sank right in. We tamped the living snot out of that, but with the weight of this truck, he just sank in, and that's as far as he could go. He was supposed to pull up to the garage and then back up to the garage, which is up here. Unfortunately, this is as far as he got. So with that, we already had the concrete on a job site, so we had to do something, and that's where we got the Kubota involved. So what we ended up having to do is shooting everything out into this Kubota bucket, driving it up here. This is the steeper part, so he wasn't making it past this. He definitely wasn't making it up this little steeper part. So we ended up shooting everything into the Kubota bucket, and then my dad just drove it up this steeper part to the slab itself. It did start to dry out as the day went, but the second truck that we had coming up, he got a little bit further, but it wasn't too much further. So this first truck, I believe, had, we got 17 yards total. He either had 9 or 10 yards on this truck. So he was the heaviest one. So basically what we ended up doing is Dad drove it all the way up. We had it in the bucket and we just dumped it into wheelbarrows, and that's how we ended up doing this entire pad. So we ended up dumping the concrete into the wheelbarrows and then spreading it out that way. This was the second biggest issue. Probably the biggest issue was this significantly slowed this job down. We're starting probably at 8 in the morning right here, and probably we would have had all of this shooted out in 2 hours. However, it took probably double, if not triple as long. This turned this 2-hour job of just shooting it out into about 5 hours. So they had to put the second truck on hold at the plant, and he staged off about an hour, hour and a half. He was going to be coming right behind this guy, but with how slow this was going, he radioed and called him off to to delay his to get filled up. So unfortunately, I didn't want to run wheelbarrows over all the pecks that we had done. I was worried about punctures and stuff, so what we ended up doing is running the wheelbarrows as best we could up through the pecks, in between the pecks, and not running over it. That was super difficult because it's only, what, 12 inches on center, so that was really difficult to do that. And you can just see how muddy this is right here. It was super difficult. So what we ended up doing is we ended up filling this front part and just getting most of our monolithic part, the footer part, filled in. And then we just came and we did this in 3 sections. So right here where Bill is standing here in the yellow, this was 12 feet. We did it in 12 feet sections. This was pull number 1. Pull number 2 was supposed to be in the middle, and then pull number 3 was supposed to be from the back to the front, all over where the bathroom and stuff is. That didn't really happen. We'll kind of get into that here in a little bit. So as the day went, here we finally have the we're starting to dump here in the middle. You can still see how tacky and just snotty it was. And this is all my dad did all day, was just shuttle this stuff around. It kind of got the Kubota all snotted up, but it's the only thing we had. I do wish we had either a skid steer here to have 2 going at the same time. That really would have helped out. But we just were kind of behind the 8 ball when it rained. And it was a Saturday, so getting rentals and stuff out there that quickly, it just wasn't going to happen. So you can see right here, what we have is we have this screeded off. We rented a power screed, and we screeded this off. This first pull got really good. Super happy with it. Nice and flat. No issues at all. What you can see Dan doing right here is he is wet setting rebar. We had rebar cut to about 4 feet with a J hook or L hook on the bottom. That was just to anchor it in. So he is wet setting these. However, we ended up having to pull him, and I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But he wet set these ones here in the back, and now he's working from the front to the back. This was the biggest place or issue where I wanted it to be wet set for sure. Because over here, it is the highest part of our dirt bank. It does kind of slope off. But right here, it is the highest, and we did have that little spring back in here, if you can remember from the previous videos. So I definitely wanted most of my strength back here. I did not want to epoxy this back here. So that's what Dan's doing here. He is wet setting these, and you can see Dad here is dumping the concrete into the wheelbarrows here. You can see right here, we have started to pull this out. But since we didn't have the chute up here to shoot all of this in, we needed this area right in here to be able to maneuver the wheelbarrows around. So we stopped pulling this out, and we started on our 3rd leg over here. And this was our 3rd pull. So you can see me here pulling the screed up to here. We're going to be pulling just this little section. But here's where we ran into a lot of issues. As it was going so slowly, this seam right here, we left the rough stuff, and we did leave it a little high here, was a super huge pain in the butt. We should have raked this off, maybe sloped it down a little bit. I don't really know what we could have done differently. We left it where we thought it was even, and it just wasn't. When we tried to pull the screed over this, this had begun to set up, and it was just super difficult to pull that screed. It turned a one-man job into 3. I pulled the screed. Mike here and Elliot ended up having to rake on either side as I pulled it, or fill in where we had low spots. And with it being that slow, it just made for a super cumbersome pull from here on out. This seam didn't get so well, like I said, because it was starting to set up. So what I did before I started screeding, this is something I learned from Dade Concrete, is you'll see me making a pad right here. And what I'm doing is just pushing the concrete out of the way to my laser level, which is set for the top of the concrete. I'm just checking it, and wherever, so that spot there was good. So this pad's good. So what we'll do is we'll overlap the screed onto this side, which is already level, put the screed onto that pad, and then just pull from there. So all the excess stuff that's in the middle gets raked out off or pushed in wherever it needs to be. And I make these pads as I go here along the way, just to make sure that we're keeping that screed on that right side level, so it's not either riding up on the material or we're digging down in too far. And those pads are there just as a reference. So like I said, Day Concrete goes over all that stuff. He's exceptional. That's a trick that I picked up from him. Definitely made it a lot easier in knowing where to pull that screed if we were high or low. So here you can see this is further on into the day. We have this already pulled out to here. We're working around here with by hand. You can see Dan here. He was wet setting. We did have another guy named Dan that going around and doing the edges, smoothing that off where I could not get with the power screed. Unfortunately, he was only slated for about 2 hours because that's all I thought it was going to be. So he had prior commitments that he had to leave. So we had to switch gears. I ended up pulling Dan, who was wet setting the rebar, and putting him to troweling the edges. That was more important than wet setting. I knew we could come back and epoxy them in. It's not as strong, but we ended up just pulling him and doing that because hitting the edges was more important than putting in the rebar. So that's where we were jockeying manpower around. Guys were doing different things all throughout the day. So big, huge props to them on just being flexible and able to maneuvering around like that. So you can see here I was getting onto this first pad with the power screed. These guys are still filling in with concrete. So that is where we came into our big, huge problem. They're still filling in concrete, and I'm on the third step. I'm already power screeding this. This still needs to be screeded off. So you can see the time difference here. These seams, they did get some bumps to them, and this is where we ran into most of our issues. So like I said, we did what we could with the time constraints that we were dealt with. You can see here, this was our last pull. I'm already working on this third section. This is already power screeded, but this is being, power troweled off. This is being power screeded, this last little bit here. So looking back at it, I could get the screed up into this area of the bathroom. However, I wish I would have kind of laid off of this a little bit because I did dish this down a little bit because all this is handwork over here, obviously around all of the plumbing issues. So this did get a little bit of depression because it was literally one track in here. I couldn't even sweep it over to kind of smooth this out because we had our one plumbing fixture right here. So there was no way to get this a little bit more evened out. So we have Bill here in the yellow. He's doing a lot of the handwork. I switched to the power trowel. Mike is now on the screed, so they had finished up, and this is the part that they were handling now as I was power troweling. Dan and Bill here were doing the manual labor to rake stuff out and get that set up for Mike here. So that's like, dudes were just switching roles, just doing all sorts of different stuff as we were going, because there was a whole bunch of different phases all at once going on. Like, this was just a final set before I got on the power trowel, and just being able to power trowel only this side, this section here in the back, and kind of leaving this alone because it was still really wet, just gave a lot of issues. And we did get some delamination over here because we did add water to get the cream to come up because it was so stiff. We ended up having some issues over in here. So now you can see My wife here is just misting the concrete. This does look dry over here. However, it is not. It still has a little bit of cream to it. You can see right here where it is starting to turn black. That is a finished product there. And like I said, over here, this turned out fantastic because this was the first pool. We had everybody on board, full manpower, and we were getting this down pretty quickly. But over in here, you can see it is still really wet and rough. Over here in the beginning, this is where we ended up doing the last portion. But this turned out really well. Super happy with it. I wish the whole day would have went like that. However, it did not. You can see in here, this was our seam. This is where we did get some high and low spots. Just because of some of the issues that we had, it was hard to get the power screed over here and smoothing off something that's you can see is darkened against something that you can't even get on with the power screed at that point. So just having to transfer between those two sections made it difficult, and evening it out made it even more difficult. So we just kind of ended up doing a horseshoe with the power trowel and just getting that done, and then hitting this last section last. So this is the final product right here. You can see what we ended up doing is, you can see the sun has set. We just got off of it now, probably half an hour to an hour ago, and we're just keeping the concrete wet. We put up sprinklers to just mist this for a good portion of the evening. Right before dark, I ended up pulling them off. The water was able to sit on there just to keep it from overheating and drying out too quickly. So that worked out really well, especially as the shade was pulling across here. So you can see right here, this section right here was our last pull. And right in here is where we got some delamination. We added water here. We had to kind of get that cream to the top. And what ended up happening is we let this overwinter. I'll talk about that here in a sec. But it just ended up delaminating, and the freeze and thaw cycle, we did ended up having some stuff pop in here. Just on the surface, and I think it was from adding water and stuff, and then hitting it with the power trowel and just pushing some of that water back down into the concrete and not allowing it to bleed up. This is where we got most of our issues. So we are going to have to come back and fix that. But you can see right here where we were hitting this. It's darkened, which is where it needs to be. But this was pulled, This was, we were hitting this with a power trowel. This was just getting to where we were getting on it, and this was still wet. So this whole layer right in here, I'm planning on having an issue with delamination and stuff. So we're going to keep an eye on that as we move forward. But right here, this section here is where we had the most issues. So it's just what the cards we were dealt and what we ended up dealing with. I'm just super thankful for the guys that I had there. It was a tough day. An easy day of just pouring and screeding out concrete turned into a easy 5-hour job of straight labor. So props to those guys. Super huge thanks to Mike, Elliot, Dan, the other Dan, and everybody in between who came out and helped. We even had Dan's son, Jaden, helping out Emily as we were finishing up over here in the end. So super big thanks to those guys. I'll roll some pictures of the stuff that they took here in the and as the day was progressing. And I just want to say thank you to those guys for coming out, helping out. And I'll just roll some of those pictures quick. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and head over to Appalachian DIY for more videos. Thanks again, guys, and I hope to see you next time.